So welcome everyone to the Strategies to Thrive in 2024 webinar brought to you by Nationwide in partnership with the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. During this webinar, we will talk about business planning actions that can protect your business now and in the future. But before we start, we wanted to remind you to please stay active on the chat by letting us know where you're joining us from. And remember to please submit any questions you may have now or throughout the presentation using the Q&A button on your Zoom screen. Okay, and now I would love to introduce our Senior Vice President of Corporate Relations, Cynthia Jaramillo. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you so much, Laura, and welcome everyone. We're so glad to have you all with us today. I'm the Senior Vice President of Corporate Relations for the United States Hispanic Chamber. Our mission is to build an ecosystem to accelerate Hispanic business growth and prosperity. We are guided by a strategic framework that we refer to as our 3 C's. That includes capital, capacity, and connections. And so this webinar in partnership with Nationwide is very timely. And before we get started, I just want to recognize our speakers today. With us, we have Ben Ayers, who is a senior economist with Nationwide, and Joe Kuo, senior director, Advanced Consulting Group. And with us today, we also have Brian Tribble, who is the senior consultant at Legacy Planning Team. And before I pass it to our presenters, I thought we would start with the poll question. So my question, Ben, for you is, what's the biggest issue for small businesses today? And please, folks that have joined us, you'll see the poll questions pop up. So please feel free to begin answering. And with that, Ben, you have the floor.
Right. Thank you, Cynthia. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Just going to give a quick update on where we see the economy right now. Give everyone just one more minute to respond to the poll. All right, so I guess if I was answering this question, I would probably add an E, which would be all of the above. These are all challenging issues for small businesses as we look in the environment today, and we'll talk a little bit about where we see those going. But I think it's not surprising to see that, inflation and finding workers, labor availability is jumping to the top of the list here. Those are 2 key issues that have been with us for several more years. We have seen, some improvement, but, a long way to go to get back to more normal environment when you're talking about both the labor market and the inflationary environment. So let's start with that labor market first and just talk at a high level about some of the numbers that we're seeing. We're generally very good job growth, particularly over the past 4 to 5 months. We've seen an acceleration of job growth. We're seeing some slowdowns in the 3rd quarter of last year coming in towards the end of the year. We said, okay, we're only averaging about 200,000 jobs per month. You see that with the dashed line there. Maybe we were starting to slow down, and then they picked up again. And you'll see the blue bars there, which represent monthly job growth over the past 4 or 5 months, very strong, and especially March, which was over 300,000. And we did have a downtick when it came to April, but still, by and large, we're seeing very good job growth. And this is great for consumers. This is great for the economy, and is one of the reasons why we're still seeing this expansion keep going. We're still seeing positive growth, and we're still seeing overall activity be much faster than we would expect, especially given the interest rate environment and just some of the slowdown that we've seen over the past couple of years. The right side of the chart tells us that not only are we adding jobs, but many workers are still finding that it's a very good environment for workers. You're seeing much higher wage growth, and that's because it's a very tight labor market. What this shows is the ratio of job openings to unemployed workers. And anytime that number is above 1, we actually have more job openings than we have unemployed workers out there. And that puts a lot of pressure on businesses. So it's not so great for businesses, but really good for consumers. And when most of our growth in the U.S. comes from the consumer standpoint, that's feeding that cycle and continuing to push the economy forward in a positive direction. So we still have about 1.3, 1.4 job openings per unemployed worker. That's down from the 2 that we were were, a few years ago. But as you can see, obviously still one of the higher readings we've had over the past couple of decades. And again, adding to wages, adding to those costs for businesses as we look out across the business scape right now. Particularly, I will call out restaurant sector. There's still more than 1 million job openings in the restaurant sector. And that's one area that has had trouble finding workers, especially over the past couple of years, as many of the workers that were laid off or furloughed over the pandemic shifted to other sectors or found better pay in different areas. And that's one area that's still sort of right-sizing from the pandemic and is certainly at the lead of what we would call a very tight market for workers that we're seeing more broadly across the economy right now. We do have some signs, though, that while consumers do have a lot of leeway when it comes to the labor market, there are some signs of stress. And particularly, we are seeing that particularly lower income and middle income households are struggling to keep up with the rise in interest rates and the rise in inflation. In fact, we crossed over $1 trillion sitting on credit cards at the end of last year for the first time ever in U.S. history. And unfortunately, we have more than 10% of that is actually more than 90 days delinquent. And that's what that left side of the chart shows. About 10.7% of that more than $1 trillion sitting on credit cards is not being actively paid on. And you're building up interest rate and is adding more pain when it comes from a financial perspective for many households. Actually, the New York Fed Bank, which puts out this data, said 1 in 5 borrowers of credit cards had actually almost tapped out and maxed out their credit limits. So clearly there is a portion of the economy that is really struggling right now, and that's the part we're concerned about. We're concerned those are the folks who are going to start to cut back on spending, and particularly if we do see a down move in the labor market, they'll be very susceptible to having some defaults on their loans, really falling behind financially. So that's the portion of the economy we are concerned about. And I think the right side of the chart, which shows the personal savings rate, is also pretty concerning. That's the part that shows that we're really not putting much in the coffers right now. There's a strong propensity to spend by most consumers. The amount of personal saving has dropped to 3.2% of disposable income. That's about half of what we had coming into the pandemic. So we've had a nice run of spending over the past couple of years, particularly fed by those big spikes, which is when the federal government provided that pandemic stimulus. We put up over $2 trillion of excess pandemic savings over the course of the pandemic, but most estimates say that's pretty much gone now. And so we spent all that. And again, more signs that some households are getting overextended, some households are falling behind, and that unfortunately could be a downside risk for growth and overall spending as we look out over the next year and into 2025. I do want to cover the inflationary environment real quickly. Obviously, a strong part of the discussion we've had over the past couple of years for what changes that have occurred from the pandemic, and obviously a big impact on what we'll see from interest rates and what we see from the Fed. Here I'm breaking inflation, here showing consumer inflation, into 3 separate areas to kind of show which areas are concerning for us and which areas are really in a pretty good shape. And it's really that dark blue line that's the positive news. That's our core goods cost. You can obviously see the spike that happened earlier in the pandemic. That was your supply chain impacts. That was the disruptions because of COVID, the increase in cost for transportation, all those factors that impacted the globe. At one point, core good prices were over 12% on a year-over-year basis. They've come all the way back down to zero and actually are deflating actively over the past year. So contributing to the inflation story, and we're a big reason why we've seen this consumer price index, which peaked at 9%, has fallen down to about the 3.5% range. The problem are the other 2 areas, and that's rents, which is your representation of housing costs, whether you're renting or whether you're owning. And it's that red line in particular. That's your core service costs less your rents. That's the part where you're seeing the flow through of the very tight labor market into the inflation story. And those are the factors that, as you can see, long-term, we'd like it to be much cooler than where we are right now, are actively preventing inflation from getting down to that 2 to 2.5% range that the Fed would like it to be. And I think, unfortunately, a consequence of some of the stronger numbers that we've seen in recent months is, in particular, that red line has picked up. It's moving in the wrong direction. We're still seeing a large increase in service costs broadly across the economy. Again, that's putting more pressure on businesses because they're at the forefront of those costs. And then by turn, they're passing along higher costs onto consumers. That's continuing to feed that inflationary cycle in too fast of a range. Unfortunately, both of these factors, whether it is the labor market or housing, tend to be sticky. And by sticky, I mean they stick with us because it's a lot harder to get a better balance when you're talking about the amount of supply and demand of houses or the supply and demand of workers overnight. It's something that might take a year, 2 years to really get back into more better balance. And unfortunately, we're still at the relatively beginning stages of that process. So again, these are factors that are probably going to keep inflation higher over 2024. I don't think we're going back to where we were the past couple of years. We're not going to see 5, 6, 7, 8% inflation, but not getting down to that 2 to 2.5% range. And obviously, when you're adding to costs onto all of the increases that we've seen over the past 3 or 4 years, this continues to pressure people's budgets. And again, if we do see a downtrend in the labor market, that could really mean some pain for many households as we look out over the next year. Shifting discussion over to the business side of things, not surprising in an environment where very hard to find workers, costs are rising, interest rates are at highest levels we've seen in quite some time. Not surprising that many small businesses are saying this is a challenging environment. On the left side of the chart here, showing the Small Business Optimism Index from the National Federation of Independent Business. And you can see the optimism at quite low levels, not quite as low as we had during the Great Financial Crisis back in 2008, 2009, but some of the very recent readings have been the lowest we've seen in over a decade. And so many small business owners are saying this is the worst environment that we've seen in quite some time. They're cutting back their plans to add workers. They're cutting back their plans to expand their businesses. It's just too expensive. It's too uncertain of an environment. They're worried about where their savings are going. They're worried about the incoming sales, where that might go over the next 6 to 12 months. And they're saying this is a time to tighten our belts, batten down the hatches, not a time to really put a lot of investment into our business. In fact, only about 4% of business owners rated this as a good time to expand your business. So many business owners are really tightening their belts. And a lot of it is the interest rate environment, as you see on the right side of the chart here, nearly double-digit rates paid by small businesses for interest rates. It's certainly the highest we've seen since at least 2007, 2006. So if you need to go out and get that loan, it's going to be quite expensive to feed those, to pay for those short-term expenses. And on top of that, banks are actively tightening their tight lending standards. So not only is it more expensive to get that loan, it might be harder to get it. And so again, kind of cutting back on the investment that we're seeing across many small businesses, it unfortunately remains a quite challenging environment to either operate a business, or particularly if you're trying to get one off the ground. This is an environment that is a little more difficult, probably not going to go away or improve overnight, probably going to continue to see this environment remain at a challenging stance for probably at least the rest of this year and maybe into 2025 as well. So just to kind of wrap up with a look at what we see for some of the key economic factors that we track here at Nationwide, starting on the left side of the chart with real GDP growth, which is our biggest, widest measure of how we see overall economic growth. Now, we've seen a solid start to 2024. We grew at 1.6% in the first quarter. Not a great growth, certainly a downtrend from where we were at the end of 2023, but still pretty far away from really worried about things slipping into a recessionary standpoint. Expecting that to be about the pace that we see over much of the rest of the year, in that 1.5% to 2%, maybe even a little bit above 2% growth, depending on the quarter for the rest of the year. So we do feel that the economy should avoid a recession this year. But as we go into next year, we're still a little bit concerned. Again, the Fed is likely to keep rates higher. We'll go over that in a second. There are signs of building weakness within the consumer sector. Obviously, a sector like a housing sector is still doing quite poorly in response to a very interest rate sensitive environment. So, we're expecting much more of the same as we saw in the early stages of 2024. Signs of growth, but still some signs of weakness, but probably not a recession this year. But still, when you look into 2025, still those risks are a little bit elevated next year. Although, again, we still could continue to avoid that as we go into next year as well. In the middle there, showing the consumer price index, which is our main reading for inflation, actually rolling a little bit hotter this year than we saw towards the end of last year. Again, we were seeing things downtrend towards the end of last year. Things have picked up, unfortunately, again in the first few months of 2024. Expect us to sit 3.5% or a little bit higher on a year-over-year basis over much of the year. So again, running a little bit hotter towards the end of the year, but we are still optimistic that as we go into 2025, and particularly as we get finally into 2026, that we will get down to that 2 to 2.5% range. Just a little bit longer to go. And unfortunately, still some upside risk as well. We haven't talked about geopolitics much, but obviously impact on energy prices is still lingering there as well. So we're optimistic we're going to get there, but again, still some further lengths to go, and obviously still some upside risk as we look out. But I think the main thing is the impact there from inflation is on the Fed, and that should drive a delay in those expected rate cuts. We're not expecting the Fed to go any higher on rates, or think we're about the peak for rates for most of the categories that we look at from a rate perspective, but not much downside, especially over the rest of this year. We don't think the Fed is going to start the lower rates till towards the end of the year, so maybe they start in September, maybe it's even a little later than that, and only expecting a little bit of relief on the rate front before the end of the year, getting down maybe about 50 basis points for the federal funds rate. More of the rate declines are going to happen next year is what we think. We think as we look ahead to next year, we'll see the Fed start to lower rates more. Again, that'll start the lower rates that consumers feel and rates that businesses feel. But I think at least for much of the next 6 to 9 months, a pretty high interest rate environment. Again, that's kind of cutting into the profit margins for many businesses, making it much more expensive to expand your capital, and obviously just putting more pressure on many business owners as we look out over the next year. So those are my comments for today. I'll hand it back to Cynthia.
Thanks, Ben. And we have a question from one of our participants before I pass it on to the next speaker. And the question is, what is the high student loan interest effect on the economy?
So the student loan interest is interesting right now, especially since the Biden administration has pushed through a lot of forgiveness on that front. So actually, delinquency rates for student loans are very low right now in response to that. Many people are just keeping up the minimum payments in the hope that eventually maybe they'll have that ultimately get forgiven. Obviously that is a drag, particularly on the younger segments of the economy. That and just the extreme cost of housing right now really limits many folks from getting out of the rental market and into the home ownership space. What we find with student loans is that unfortunately the people who have them have a lot, and a lot of people don't have much at all. So it's really more impactful for a smaller segment of the borrowers there, much more so than the broad scape. But certainly something we're keeping an eye on as we look out in our forecast.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Ben, and thank you for your presentation. Your presentation showcased a robust labor market. We heard that small businesses are optimistic, but there are some concerns we should be aware of. For example, small businesses are tightening their belts, I heard you say. The restaurant sector currently has over 1 million job openings, which is an area that we need to prioritize as an organization. You also shared that households are overextended, leading to a decrease in household disposable income. So thank you for that, Ben. And I think I'm going to go ahead. We have time for another poll question. And let's go with poll question number 2. Do you currently work with a financial professional? Yes or no? And with that, I will introduce our next speaker, Ben Ayers, Senior Economist with Nationwide. Ben, take it away.
Yes, and Ben, thanks for your comments. My name is Brian Tribble. I am Senior Consultant with Nationwide, and that's okay.
Forgive me.
So my name is Brian Tribble. I lead Nationwide's business planning program, which is called Your Business, Your Legacy. So my team is made up of myself and 2 other consultants, and we work with financial advisors all across the country to help them put business owners in a more secure financial position. So we do that in a couple ways. First, we provide financial advisors with tools and analytics that help them better understand their business owner clients and their unique business and financial situation. Once we've got a better understanding of a unique business and the owner and all of their financial situation, we help the financial advisor design tailored solutions and strategies to help address some of their financial planning needs. So I want to start off with a couple of the more common financial planning challenges that business owners face. The reality is entrepreneurs have a much more complex financial situation than maybe your average working professional. So if you take your typical 9-to-5 employee, they may have a stable salary, a 401k plan, sometimes a pension, and employer-sponsored benefits and insurance. So they can build a nest egg by contributing to that retirement plan, invest in financial markets, and if they're diligent savers, they can retire off of their portfolio and Social Security benefits. And for your average working professional, it's probably a lot more simple to assess whether you're on track with your financial goals or not. Business owners don't necessarily have those luxuries. The business owner tends to have a lot more unpredictable cash flow. That might fluctuate with some of the things Ben was talking about, so your business and economic conditions, and then it could be impacted by things like supply chains or personnel issues or unexpected losses or a variety of different reasons. So as a result of kind of that unpredictable cash flow, it's common for business owners to invest the majority of their earnings back in their business. And that's not only to try and grow the business, but it's also to provide a buffer in the event of a down cycle. So all the capital demands a small business has means that there is a lot less savings opportunities for personal savings and retirement savings for that business owner. And for that reason, we tend to see really high concentration with business owners in their actual business and little diversification outside of their business. So everybody's situation is a little bit different, but on average, a business owner's business represents about 80% of their wealth. And when your net worth is so highly concentrated in a single illiquid asset, it becomes very difficult to plan for your financial future as well as retirement. So that's why it's really important, and we believe that having a financial advisor in your corner or a financial professional that understands the nuances of financial planning for business owners is so critical. So I'll shift over and talk about some of the things that financial advisors, especially ones that we work with, may be able to help you as a business owner with. So this is not a comprehensive list. Some financial professionals might offer things that are not on this list, like business coaching, and some may only offer a few or none of these. But I think when most people think of a financial professional, they associate that with the two on the left side there, which is risk management and wealth management. Or insurance and investing. So these are two certainly cornerstones of any holistic financial plan, but there are many other planning components that don't get talked about quite as much. So some of the other ones on this screen here, those are the ones that my group specializes in, and they can help round out a holistic financial plan for a business owner. So I'll start with tax and estate planning. These are very complex topics. My colleague Joe will talk a little bit more about some of these coming up here soon. But at a high level, tax and estate planning strategies are really meant to structure your wealth and structure your income sources to maximize the amount of wealth you retain for yourself and your family and possibly any charitable inclinations you might have, at the same time minimizing what you send to the government. So due to the complexity of these strategies, I won't go into too much depth. We always recommend that you and your financial advisor work closely with a tax and legal professional for any type of tax and estate planning. And then we have business succession and exit planning. So these are two pretty interrelated topics, but there are some distinct differences here. So business succession is really about creating a pathway for future leaders of the company to take over the business so it can thrive once the owner has departed. So when we usually think about a transition of ownership, we typically think of a voluntary sale or a transfer to a family member or key employee, and typically on the business owner's terms, which is the ideal situation. Unfortunately, data tells us that about half of the transitions from one owner to another are involuntary. And come due to unexpected circumstances. So that could be the death of an owner, disability, a health concern, a divorce, legal trouble, bankruptcy. Any and all of those things are factors in possibly an involuntary transition of ownership. So a good succession plan will account for both the expected and the unexpected circumstances and help govern a transition regardless of the situation. Exit planning, on the other hand, is more about preparing the owner to successfully transition from life in the business to life after the business. And that's really about ensuring that a business owner can harvest adequate value from their business, as well as their other assets to support their family and their lifestyle once they've departed from that business. So I'll shift gears here a little bit and talk about what my team does to help financial advisors navigate some of these conversations they might be having with you on some of the topics from the previous slide. And so I do want to start by adding the things I'm about to talk about and the services that my team offers. We do not charge for those services. Those services and the reports that we run, we offer at no cost to financial advisors who are appointed with Nationwide. So if you have a financial advisor that's appointed with Nationwide, anything I talk about is something that would be available to you. So I'll kind of share a quick example of one of the engagements that we've had recently. So we had a financial advisor who requested that we do an analysis on one of their clients. That client owned a construction company that had been very successful. And they started by sending us some basic information about the business. So business's financial statements, some of their goals and concerns, and then some other summary of kind of the financial situation the business owner was in. Once we got that information, our team takes a look under the hood, and we put together an analysis and then a business valuation report. So that's typically our starting place for any engagement we have with an advisor and a business owner. So the business valuation report is really meant to provide the advisor and the business owner with an estimation of how much the company is worth. And we believe that a business valuation is really the centerpiece of developing a holistic financial plan for anyone who owns a business. So once we completed the report, we used that to help the financial advisor design and fund a business succession plan. And then once we had that designed and funded, the advisor ran a retirement analysis using the business valuation to determine if the business owner was on track to meet their retirement goals. So if they were going to have enough capital in order to fund their retirement income sources. So once we did that, finally, the advisor made some recommendations on how to de-risk and increase and protect the value of that business, which is going to help make it more marketable to a potential buyer. So every business is a little bit different. Their needs will vary based on where they're at in their journey. And every interaction is going to be a little bit different, and every recommendation is going to be unique to that business owner. So if you're interested in an assessment from our team, talk to your financial advisor to see if your business qualifies, and if it does, our team would be happy to help. So I realize that not everybody on this call may work with a financial professional at the moment. So if you don't work with a financial professional, here are a few tips on how to find somebody who might be a good fit for you. And the first tip is always to leverage your network. So your network, primarily other business owners or business advocacy groups, can be a great source of referrals to find somebody who has experience working with somebody who's similar to you. So you may also ask other professionals in your group. So if you have an accountant or CPA or an attorney, or your lender who's got a recommendation on somebody to work with, that's another great place to start as well. So ultimately, the most important factor in that relationship is built on trust, working with somebody who has integrity, working on it with somebody who will deliver on their promises, and somebody who always looks out for your best interests. So I always recommend doing your own research, even if you have a recommendation from a trusted source or partner or somebody within your network. And the internet can be a very helpful tool there. So there's a website called brokercheck.com, and that allows you to look up for any financial professional, their employment history, their credentials, their background, and some other information as well. And you can always look at the financial professional's website to look into a little bit more about their practice and what services they offer, and who's with the practice as well. So you'll see in the middle column here, I've listed some things that as business owners you may want to consider when you're looking for a financial professional. So if you decide to take on that journey, one of the first things to think about is what services does a potential advisor offer. So you might look at a fee-based financial advisor, for example. They may be more focused on investing and portfolio management, whereas if you work with a certified financial planner, they may look at your business and your financial situation a little bit more holistically and provide advice as a service. So there's no right or wrong answer. There's a lot of different models out there, but it's important to understand the services they offer to make sure that they align with your ultimate goals. And you may also want to look at somebody who's got experience working with business owners. So I always recommend asking the advisor, if you're interviewing them, what other business owners have they worked with and how have they helped them and what services have they provided to that business owner? And ultimately, what are the expectations if you hire them? So it's important to have all those things. And again, this is not a comprehensive list, but it is a good starting place if you're considering hiring a financial professional. So you'll probably notice on the right-hand side of your screen, we've included a QR code that will link you to Nationwide's team of financial specialists here at our home office. So if you don't have a financial professional at the moment and you would like to explore my team's planning service, please feel free to get in touch with one of the specialists through that QR code. And you can request a complimentary business valuation report and analysis from our team. So I will pass it back to you, Cynthia, and
Awesome.
happy to answer any questions if we got them.
Yes, absolutely. And Brian, please forgive me for referring to you as Ben. I know we can't cut that because it's, we're live. But my apologies for that. We have a few comments in the Q&A. One comment is many of the participants are financial professionals. And another question, which I think you may have addressed, is what are the ways to find a good financial planner? So if you'd like to elaborate or share some more insights in the chat, please do.
Yeah, of course. And I hope that last slide was fairly telling into some of the things to find a financial advisor or financial professional. So again, I always recommend doing as much research and the first person that you talk to that may offer services or financial advice doesn't have to be the last person you talk to. Ultimately, the relationship with a financial advisor should be a long-term relationship, and it should be something that's both give and take, and that you work with over the course of your career and wherever you're at in the journey to help you prepare for future financial situations. So again, leveraging the network, looking out for credentials. So some of the credentials that you might look out for are CFP, which is Certified Financial Planner. That represents a board certified financial planning expert. There are other ones that are more specialized. So you might look at a CEPA, which is a Certified Exit Planning Advisor, and they are typically specializing in help business owners prepare to exit their business and the things to do in order to prepare for a potential sale or a potential transition, and then life after that sale or transition.
Great, thank you for that, Brian. And I will address another comment in the Q&A. The comment is, isn't this seminar for financial professionals? And so I'll just address the comment, or the question rather, with saying that we opened up the opportunity for those that are in search of a financial planner, and in addition to financial professionals. So hopefully I answered your question. And with that, I am going to introduce our next presenter, Joe Kuo, who is the Senior Director of Advanced Consulting Group. Joe, please take it away.
Thank you very much. Very happy to see everybody today. I hope you're having a great day. So my name is Joe Kuo, and I run the Advanced Consulting Group supporting the life business here at Nationwide. And what I want to do today is talk about business planning for the small business owner, but more importantly, start with the benefits that we are either familiar with or not familiar with. So as you know, the great pandemic has caused a dramatic shift in the way businesses run. You probably see on the news every day, right? Businesses, they're having a hard time trying to find qualified employees. You probably see news about people not wanting to work anymore. So business models have changed. And now we're seeing a lot more holistic business benefits, employee benefits, to try to recruit, retain, and reward employees. So we're all familiar with health insurance, and that's kind of the staple of most businesses. And we're also familiar with things called 401k plans or retirement plans. More and more businesses are now adding options, for example, disability, long-term care, chronic illness, counseling, legal support and advice, maybe coaching or grief counseling. So you'll see that these benefits are getting wider and wider and bigger. But that really focuses on the employees. And what we find is that there is a disconnect when we talk about benefits. Most employers are thinking, well, I already have an employee benefits plan for my employees, so I don't really need any help. Well, we're focusing today is really on the entrepreneur, right? We're focusing on you, the business owner. And you'll see that in the news, many people are now moving away from the traditional employee and moving into a entrepreneurial type of position, or perhaps even a quasi entrepreneurial position. You'll see we hear about the gig economy, right? Driving, for example, Uber, or doing chores that most people won't want to do. Where employees have a very specialized skill where they can actually ghostwrite articles, where they can actually do coding. And so now we have more and more people working for themselves. And here at Nationwide, we notice that we want to make sure that we can help those potential clients protect themselves. So as an owner of the business, your focus is going to be a little bit different than from the position of an employee. And what I want to focus on today really is focusing on estate planning, key person insurance, and buy-sell agreements. These are sort of the three pillars that a owner of a business would probably want to pay attention to, because as that business becomes more and more successful, these themes starts to appear. And so first of all, what is estate planning? Now, this may not just only apply to business owners. This applies to every one of us, right? And so estate planning, when we talk about that, it's funny, when I was an estate planner, people say, well, I don't want to do estate planning. I'm like, well, why? Because I don't want to die. And that's sort of kind of the running joke, right? It's not about death planning. It's really about planning for the future, because, as they say, there are two mathematical certainties in life, right? You got to pay taxes and there's death. And so if we can get ahead of this, we can save ourselves and our family a lot of grief and a lot of despair. So it's really simple. One, what is estate planning? We have to, there's a couple of steps. Let's identify the assets. Now, when we say this, it sounds simple, but is it really? Assets used to be pretty simple. Liquid assets, illiquid assets, right? Homes, maybe a cash account, maybe a pension plan, a 401k plan. But now we have Bitcoin, we have cryptocurrency, we have pets, right? A lot of our assets are located on the web, and it can only be accessed through a identifier, a username and password. And so assets, where they're located, have become a lot more complicated. So we have to identify assets, but make sure that not only are the assets identifiable by us, but upon, for say, my demise, my heirs and my family can actually find those assets, know where the assets are held, and have the passwords to access those assets. And so this is something that it sounds simple, But when you actually sit down and start to write down and identify the types of assets a person you may have, it becomes a lot more comprehensive. So once you identify the assets, we want to make sure that it goes to the right people. And so in most situations, most people have what we call I love you wills. I love you, you love me. When I pass away, it goes to my spouse, vice versa. But what happens when both spouses are gone, right? We have children, we have grandchildren, we have nieces and nephews, other family members. And families dynamics are very, very different. We all may care about people that are completely different than the other family, right? And so we want to make sure that we identify the recipients. And once we identify the recipients, we want to make sure that those assets are going to the right recipient. So I'll give you an example here. We identify some assets. We want to make some charitable gifts. Well, maybe you want to give to your school, to your alma mater, to a church, whatever that may be. You want to make sure that those organizations are actually identified in your plan, right? And then you want to make sure that the right assets goes to the right organization, because sometimes the wrong assets may not be suitable for that specific person or organization. In a business situation, for example, what if I have two children and my daughter is very, very well versed in my business, works with me on a daily basis, and my son, for example, wants to go to medical school? Well, if I've identified those two recipients, my son and my daughter, and now I want to transfer my business to these two people. Well, is it equal or is it fair? Should I transfer my business equally to my son and my daughter? Well, equally, yes, 50-50. But is that fair, right? Is that fair to my daughter? And would that prevent her from making this business and run the business continuously and let it be successful? And is it the right asset? Because my son's going to be a doctor. He has no interest in running the business. And so these two plans, although it sounds simple, actually is why you need that financial professional, because that financial professional, like Brian says, can help you, can guide you through this process to make sure that the right stuff goes to the right people. And that's really what estate planning is all about. And how do we achieve that? Well, estate planning requires documentation. Okay, so because once we pass away, we want to make sure that there's documentation to evidence the intent. So you'll hear about documents like wills, trusts, living wills, and powers of attorneys. And what these documents do is to help get 1, 2 to 3. That's what it does. A will, real quickly, is what we call a testamentary document. What does that mean? It means that it has no relevance. It has no legal meaning while I'm alive. It only comes into play upon my death, and it has to go through a probate process. Okay, so there's a misunderstanding for a lot of people say, I have a will, so I'm good. No, just because you have a will doesn't mean that 1, 2, and 3 is going to work, because that will has to go through a probate process. What does probate process mean? It means we have to prove the will is actually valid. It is a process. It could go quickly, maybe a month or two. And of course, if you have a very, very large estate, like many of the celebrities that we hear about, it can go on for years and years, even decades. So this is where the financial professional can help guide you, because sometimes just having a will may not be enough. A trust is something that's more substantive, right? Substantial, because a trust may, depending on the kind of trust you draft, help you achieve those goals right now. A trust does not have to go through the probate process. A trust is a legal document, and a trust can help facilitate the process that we talk about today immediately or potentially later on in your life. A living will can help you decide upon what's going to happen to a person when they become sick, when they become incapacitated. You can basically write out how you want to take care of yourself, how you want your family to take care of yourself, and how do you want to basically deal with the situation, medical situations in life. And powers of attorney basically allows you to direct whoever that person may be to help get your assets in the right order, get your documentations in place. Basically, if I'm incapacitated, this person will come in what we call it as an attorney in fact and represent me. So real quickly, we have a situation here. Let's talk about some key person. So Diana and Martin, they're business partners, and they have 10 employees, right? And so we have Diana, and she is the primary revenue generator, and she owns all the client relationships. Martin is an operational manager, and they're both treated like family, right? And so these are actually very, very important people in this business. And so what we see here is that Cali Company has identified these two individuals as key people. Key people are just like spouses, right? Because your spouse runs the household, okay? And so without these two, Cali Company probably will go through substantial stress. If they both if they pass away, if they become incapacitated, if they become sick, they can't come to work, what's going to happen to that business? So in a very simple situation, we call that key person. Cali Company would purchase a life insurance policy with Nationwide. The Cali Company will be the owner and the beneficiary of this policy, insuring both Diana and Martin. Obviously, Diana and Martin they have to approve this. They have to be notified of this. And they're basically allowing Cali Company to insure their lives because they are that important to the company. Now, if Diana passes away unexpectedly, Cali Company can use, because Cali Company is the owner and beneficiary, they will receive the death benefit income tax free to the company. Now, that's huge. And what that company can do, they can use that death benefit to recruit CARLA. They can make sure that budgets are in place. They can make sure that bills are paid, and they could potentially even use a portion of that death benefit to take care of the decedent employee. Now, in this situation, we have two partners. They're owners of a company, right? And there's a big myth. So here we have Stella and Juan. They're owner of a company. Let's say they're lawyers. They have a law firm, or they own a construction company, whatever it may be. Most people think that, well, if let's say Juan passes away, most people think Stella automatically becomes 100% owner of this construction company. That is a myth. If Juan passes away first, his share will pass to his family, whether via will, via trust, or if Juan did nothing. It's called intestate succession. What does that mean? That is the worst possible scenario you can actually be in, because now you revert to state law, and the states now take over. So that is something you absolutely do not want to, you don't want to be in that position. All right. So the reality is that we have to do some estate planning here to make sure that even though Juan's ownership will pass to his family, because that's what his family wants, right? Juan's family wants the money. They want the assets. But Stella does not want Juan's family to get involved in the business, right? Stella does not want Juan's family to make business decisions. So Stella wants to be 100% owner of the company. She'll continue to run the company. She'll manage the company. But Juan's family has now received financial security. They're taken care of. They can use that money for school, for education, and for Juan's wife future support. And so thank you so much for your attendance. Just like in personal life, estate planning, life insurance, these are all valuable tools. It's just a tool, right? We're not saying that we have to buy life insurance. We're not saying you have to buy certain financial products. All we're saying is that when you consult with your financial professional, you can make a decision, right? And it's just basically about risk management. That's all it is. Am I going to absorb that risk myself? Or is it cheaper, or does it make more economic sense for me to transfer that risk to, say, a life insurance company like Nationwide? And when I transfer that risk to Nationwide, are the premiums that I'm paying, are they reasonable? Are they less than me just self-insuring myself? And so we have a QR code here. If you don't have a financial professional, please take a look at this QR code. And we also have a website here called freewill.com/nationwide. But the caveat is, remember, that's a myth. People think that the will is a save-all, one-shot document. It is not. A will is simply part of a comprehensive estate planning package.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Joe. You covered a lot, from estate planning, business succession, the probate process, the importance of living wills versus trusts, risk management, family business conflicts and opportunities. So thank you for that presentation. And before, I believe we have time for a few questions, but we'll put up the last poll question. And that question is, do you have a succession plan for your business? Yes or no? And
I know you are not able to see it immediately. I just want to give it a minute so that I can share the results. But it sounds like 67% so far have said no. So I'm pretty sure that this information was extremely helpful to all of them. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for that, Laura. We do have time for a few questions that were submitted during the registration process. And please, whomever, Ben, Brian, or Joe, feel free to jump in to answer the question. The first question is, I am focused on helping people that want to start their own business and need help. Could you please add your perspective and strategies on this topic? And you all covered a lot of this, but feel free to elaborate.
Well, so my question will be, the question is kind of generic. Are you trying to coach someone? So for example, so here's my take. There is now, this movement of, and you'll see a lot of people on TikTok and on YouTube saying, why would you work for somebody? Why would you work for somebody? You should be your own boss, be an entrepreneur, right? And we see kind of this movement. We see a lot of young people, the new generation, saying, no, I don't want to work for a company. I want to start my own business. I want to be my own boss. I want to be in control. And we see that. And to me, it sounds very, very sexy, right? I'm my own boss. I control my destiny. But what I would say is it really that bad to work for somebody else? Is it really that bad to work for a nice organization, like Nationwide, for example? I enjoy working here immensely. I used to be an entrepreneur myself, and I came back to work for a large corporation. Is it that bad, right? So that's what I would say is, okay, what is the motivation to go from, say, an employee to an employer or an entrepreneur? And more importantly, I think as a business coach, you want to make sure that this person is making the right decision. So I'm more conservative. So if I'm going to move from an employee to an employer position, obviously I want to sit down with someone who knows what they're talking about, a financial professional, and start going through the pros and cons. Right. And so something as simple as making sure that you have perhaps 6 or 7 months of savings, making sure that you have a well-crafted business plan, making sure that if you need financing, you actually explore the financing options. You spoke to banks, you spoke to bankers, you know what the interest rate may be, you know what your payments are, right? And perhaps even having it. And when I say business plan, it has to be comprehensive. Have you done market studies? Do you have potential clients that will immediately work with you once you start your business? So it sounds like it's common sense, but I think this world right now, a lot of common sense has gone away because people become, they're thinking they have these grand scheme and grand ideas. So that would be my advice, to make sure that you get back to the basics. Make sure that if I transfer to a business, if I start a business, I can actually survive, right? And then short term, long term, can I survive 3 months, 6 months to a year, right? And after that, what are my goals for expansion, or perhaps even trying to maintain the level of business that I have now?
Oh, great. I think great and very informative recommendation in answer. It looks like I'm just checking the Q&A to see if there are any other questions. And some of the other questions that were submitted are very similar. And so with that, I believe I can open it up for any last closing remarks, or I'm happy to do the final closing. Okay.
So
I see. Please.
Well, I see one quick Q&A there. So the question is, are the speakers able to make recommendations to us from it? Yeah. So if you are contracted with Nationwide Financial, all of us here are resources to you as a financial professional. So we are all here. We're available to help. We can speak. We could do webinars. We have lots of materials. We could do training. So yes, please reach out to us.
Absolutely. And we're happy to make their contact information available to our participants. Please feel free to reach out to the United States Hispanic Chamber directly for any questions following this webinar. And let's see, I'm going to check one more time because it looks like I had missed one. Okay, that's the question you caught, Joe. So thank you so much. Well, on behalf of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, I would like to thank Ben, Brian, and Joe, and the team at Nationwide, who has been such an integral partner to the USHCC in supporting and serving Hispanic and small businesses all over the country. Thank you to all of our participants for joining us today for this very timely webinar, Strategies to Thrive in 2024. More to come. Thanks, everyone.